Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. For the past 2 days, I have listened to messages on the sovereignty of God. One that was yesterday that I didn't get time to make a video, but I was going to. It was by Tony Evans, God Knows What He Is Doing. And today is by Robert Madu, and it is the law of 50-20. So I didn't really know when I clicked on the law 50-20 what it was about, because it just said the law 50-20. And so until he went into the message and he talked about the scripture verse from Genesis 50-20. So the law of 50-20, and this is how the scripture verse reads. As for you, you meant evil against me, comma, but God meant it for good, to bring about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. Okay, so it talks about the story of Joseph. And for those of you who don't know the story of Joseph, he basically went from the pit to the palace. He was the favored child of Jacob. And he was, I think, the 11th son of Jacob. And, Jacob favored him, and he bought him this coat of many colors that was very bright. And Joseph had dreams, and he was telling his brothers, and they were just basically sick of him. So they decide that they're going to throw him in a pit and leave him to die. But they felt bad about that, so they did throw him in the pit. But then they went back and got him, and then they sold him to slavery. And the sad thing is they sold him for like 22 shekels, which Robert Madu had said that was what brought in the price of a handicapped slave. Because I'm sure Joseph, when he was thrown in that pit, there was no water in that pit. So he probably broke some bones and had some cuts and bruises. And anyway, so he gets sold, and Potiphar buys him. And Joseph is just doing his job. He has a great spirit, even though this has happened to him. He is still doing about what God, his light inside of him. And Potiphar's wife keeps making advances at him. But Potiphar turns her down, and she goes and lies to her husband, and then he gets thrown into jail. So in jail, he meets a person, and then Joseph's interpreting dreams, and the guy goes and tells, and Joseph has to interpret dreams, and then he finds himself in the palace, that he's second in command. And then his brothers are in a foreign land, and they come because there's a famine. And Joseph recognizes his brothers. They don't recognize him at first, and he sees them, and he takes them and aside, and they're scared when they recognize it's Joseph. And but Joseph shows them grace, and he shows them mercy. And that's where the verse 50-20 comes in, is that you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And if you can reflect over your life, your course of your life, of things that has happened to you, injustices, unfairness, that you literally did not, it just happened to you. Robert Madu talks about in that scripture text, you meant it for evil, comma, but God meant it for good. That comma means a continuation, that it's not over in a sentence structure. And but, anything that comes after but supersedes the beginning. So, and that's in English, in grammar. So the but, that conjunction word, you meant it for evil, but God. And we hear that a lot. We see it on shirts. We see it on, but God, but God, but God. And I just want you to remember that God is going to flip the script. It's a promise that when we are seeking and serving Him, it's not that bad things won't happen to us, because it will. Bad things will happen to us. But God is going to use those bad things to strengthen you. And not only strengthen you, but He's going to take what happened to you and elevate it. If you learn from Him, if you are living for Him, if you see His hand in it, if you trust, if you believe, if you're a child of God, God is going to take all of that bad and He's going to use it. Okay? And you're going to grow. And you know what? I know what He used some really bad in my life, but you know what? What happened to me brought me to my knees. It brought me to my knees to cry out for Him. And I have a relationship that is stronger and full of faith and trust that I would have never had if it hadn't have been what happened to me. And you know, I reflect, what happened to me has given me life. So I have a weighted faith. I see the hand of God on my life. I see what He has done with that injustice, with that unfair, you know, like, no matter what has been brought against me, God has superseded it. Like, I have not lost my faith. I have only cried out to God and asked, you know, even worship Him, even in the pain, because He is faithful. And I know and I trust Him. Like, the power of what He's done for me has just really caused me to be bold. It's caused me to be courageous. It's caused me to, you know, to wear my coat proudly. You know, like that's what Robert Madu was talking about, is like, who to blame here in this situation. And he was talking about blaming the father because there shouldn't have been favoritism. Then he was talking about Joseph, blaming Joseph because, you know, he wore this coat and kind of bragged about it. But then, you know, Robert Madu said, wait a minute, it's not Joseph's fault that his father favored him, and it's not, he shouldn't have to shrink. And he told us as children of God that we are to wear our coats proudly, that we are not to shrink before any man, that God has favored and that God has anointed and God has appointed and He has redeemed and He has restored. And you are not to shrink over that. You are to shout it out. You are to just shout it out, because it is by God's grace and that He's done this for you. And you know, so no matter what has happened in your life, I don't care what it is. I mean, I do care, but I'm just saying He's going to turn it around. But it might take years. I think it took Joseph 22 years to go from the pit to the palace. 22 years. But he faithfully served. He faithfully believed. And he didn't let what happened to him turn him into this ugly, mean person. He didn't. And the thing is what's happened to you, God is going to use it to help others, because the truth that he shares with you, the visions he shows you, the dreams he has for you, all of those things God is going to use from your deliverance. Okay? And, you know, you can say that betrayal, that rejection, it has set you up. It has set you up. Because it's if you can look at it as God's protection and not man's rejection, then it's all in the mental mind flip, guys. A changed mind is a changed life, and God calls us to transform our thinking, transform our renew your minds. And when you renew your mind and you can think about him and his word and his promises, then you don't get tripped up by the things of this world. So, you know, not only did Joseph forgive, but he really saved his brothers, and he said, I will, you know, give to your children and their children, I think. And so life is full of many heartaches and hardships. And I want you not to lose hope and not to lose heart, because when you are a child of God, he's got his hand on you no matter what is happening to you. You know, if you feel that you're being whatever, God's going to use that. And it might be that he's going to teach you. He's going to weed out some things in your life that aren't supposed to be there, like pride. I can promise you, I had pride. And pride blinds us, guys. When we are pride, and the other message I listened to was about pride, and it was about blinding us from seeing things that other people see. You know, God uses people in our lives. He uses those, honestly, that aren't for us. He can, you know, we can learn from everybody. And, you know, what was meant to harm us, you know, what they're doing to us or what they're saying to us, in reality can teach us, and cause us to be one with the Lord, to be in alignment with God. It can help us get rid of sin in our life, just by us being aware. Wow, is that truth? Is that truth? Is that really true about me? And then, you know, it brings us to our knees. And this has happened to me time and time again. You know, God has used people that I didn't expect to use in my life. And I've been betrayed by people that I didn't expect to be betrayed by. But for a while, it did mess with me. I was very angry. I wanted to pay evil for evil, and I wanted to get even. But the word I kept hearing from the Lord is, you got to trust me. Vengeance is mine. I'm going to use this for good. And you're going to walk out of this in victory. And I'm going to get the glory. And those words are ever so true. Like, if you would have told me that I had to go through this to get to where I'm at, I wouldn't have volunteered to do that. So God never shows us the end result. He just gives us the next. And as we walk the next, I mean, there's plot twist all along. Just like in Joseph's story, you're thinking, yay, he's been elevated to this place. And then bam, something happens, and then he gets sent to jail. But, you know, in jail, he still was speaking about, you know, having a good spirit and a good heart. And just don't give up on your heart, guys. Don't give up on who God has created you to be. You're not a mean, evil person, okay? And if you are, I'm praying for you, because you need to get with God. But if you if your heart is pure and you really are seeking him and you really want to do the right thing and you are his child and you know it beyond a shadow of a doubt, you're just going to have to be patient, because God is going to use all of that and he is going to flip it. And when he does, you're going to see. You're going to see. And if you never see why here, he'll let you know in heaven. But like, it's too good to be true. And so I want you to look at your life like this. I want you to know that when you're going through hardships and when you're going through trials and when you seem so overwhelmed that you are sinking and that you can't even breathe, know that God is up to something. He is up to something, because when he allows the enemy to test us, to try us, you know, he has a plan. And, you know, nothing that and that's the sovereignty of God. There is nothing that happens to us that he doesn't allow. And some people have a hard time with that. Like, how could he possibly allow that? He never wanted it. But he uses it, and he uses it to bring about his glory and about his mission and purpose, and to get others to come to know him and to reconcile you with him. That relationship, that reconciliation is, you know, the greatest thing. And that is his point. Sin separated. Jesus came to reconcile us back to God. And so our will, it's not about our happiness, guys. I mean, you're going to be happy when you're walking in the will of God. You're going to have joy that abounds. You're going to have peace that passes all understanding, regardless of the storms in your life. You are truly, it's going to be okay. You can be like Jesus sleeping on the boat when that storm came. You just know. You trust him. And so as I'm looking here at my notes, there's some things that I circled, which meant that I needed to share with you because they were powerful points when I was listening. I mean, the whole message was powerful. You need to go watch it. The Law of 50-20, Robert Madu. It was at Val's Church, I think. But, you know, let's see, number one was, wear your coat. Okay, don't shrink for anybody. You got the word, do it. Number two, scream the dream. You know, Robert was talking about how maybe if Joseph just would have shut up, maybe if he wouldn't have shared things, that he wouldn't end up in that pit, if he would have just shut up about his dream. But then he said, no, we need to scream the dream, because we need to follow through on those dreams that God's given you. And he's given us dreams. He's given you a dream. What are you doing with it? Are you just not following through with it? The next thing I put is his sovereignty is your sanity. Okay? To keep peace and to keep your sanity, just know that God is sovereign. Don't be crazy thinking all of this stuff is happening to you and let the enemy defeat you with depression and all of that, because his sovereignty is your sanity. When you trust him, when you trust his promises, and you just know, that will be your sanity. The next one is, let's see. Okay. The Lord was with Joseph. That was repeated more than once. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. You know what? The Lord is with you too. Okay? You are his child. That is if you're a believer. If you're not a believer, it's a simple, easy gift that you just have to accept. Jesus, God, I believe that you sent your son Jesus to die for my sins. Forgive me for my sins. I believe in you and your Son, and come into my heart. Come into my heart. And you know, that is the simplest gift. And it's just waiting for you to receive it. And that's as easy it is. You just got to believe, but you really have to believe. And then you have a faith like a child. You just trust, okay? You don't try to reason it like man does. You don't try to figure it out. You know, my whole life, I never questioned God. I never blamed him either. And, you know, and I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at me. I always knew it was me. You know, I wasn't happy with the things that God had allowed in my life and that had happened to me. But I can't recall a time that I was angry with him. Hurt, maybe, by the choices, but not angry. And so, the Lord loves you. He really wants you to have an abundant life. But more than anything, he wants you to be his child. He wants to be your father. And you have to make him your Lord. And I mean, just all these things that God gives you when you chase after him. But you have to chase after him. You can't just, you know, be halfway. You have to be all in. You have to literally sacrifice your life and surrender it to receive all that he has in store for you. And the understanding, you know, when reading scripture, you can't possibly understand it if you haven't surrendered your life to him. Like, the scriptures don't come alive like they do when you do that. So, you know, as I read them now, I've read them most of my whole life. They don't come alive like they come alive now. Okay? So just know that the Lord is with you. He is sovereign. And I will read this 50:20 again. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Have a great day.